Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, may the faith you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ, our brother, and the flame of charity enkindled in our hearts by the Holy Spirit reawaken in us the blessed hope for the coming of your kingdom. May your grace transform us into tireless cultivators of the seeds of the gospel. May those seeds transform from within both humanity and the whole cosmos, in the sure expectation of a new heaven and a new earth, when, with the powers of evil vanquished, your glory will shine eternally. May the grace of the Jubilee reawaken in us pilgrims of hope, a yearning for the treasures of heaven. May that same grace spread the joy and peace of our Redeemer throughout the earth. To you, our God, eternally blessed, be glory and praise forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
So we turn to scripture. We're looking here at Luke's Gospel. Would anyone like to read for us?
Every year, his parents used to go to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up for the feast as usual. When the days of the feast were over and they set off home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem without his parents knowing it. They assumed he was somewhere in the party, and it was only after a day's journey that they went to look for him among their relations and acquaintances. When they failed to find him, they went back to Jerusalem looking for him everywhere. It happened that 3 days later, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all those who heard him were astounded at his intelligence and his replies. They were overcome when they saw him, and his mother said to him, "My child, why have you done this to us? See how worried your father and I have been looking for you." He replied, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he meant. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and lived under their authority. His mother stored up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and with people. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you, Shannon. So as we look at this gospel passage, I want to highlight 4 things, and we'll delve into those 4 things, 4 lines rather, 4 phrases from this gospel passage. The first being, they looked for him among their relations. The second, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. The third, did you not know that I must be in my father's house? Some translations say, or about my father's business. And fourthly, he lived under their authority and increased in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and with people. 4 very important phrases as it pertains to youth ministry. And I'm just going to expound on that a bit as we navigate and contextualize youth ministry here this evening. So they were looking for Jesus, but they looked for Jesus where? Among their relations, which is quite telling for us. From this, we can realize that youth ministry has to be contextualized within a family or within a relational setting. And that's important for us to know, because youth don't exist on their own. They don't just drop from trees or fall from stalks or just show up or pop up from the earth. They exist within a context. And that context is very often family life. Which brings us to the definition of youth ministry. Youth ministry is the response of the Christian community to the needs of youth. When we say youth in this session today, we're talking about both adolescents and young adults. So we're talking about the Christian community's response to the needs of youth and their families. All right, so Jesus was among his relations. They were looking for Jesus among his relations. So it's the needs of the youth and their families, and sharing of the unique gifts and talents with the wider community. So when we're referring to youth ministry, this is what we're talking about. How the Christian community, how the community of believers can respond to the needs of youth and their families. And together now, once we're able to respond to the needs of the youth and their families, how can we now then help these young people to share their unique gifts and talents with the wider community and participate in the full life of the church? So that's what we're talking about when we're referring to youth ministry. All right, so it's always good to refresh this and contextualize what we're talking about. And that first line that stood out there would have been, they looked for Jesus among his relations. And that's because youth exists within a setting primarily, and that setting, in most cases, is the family life. The second line, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Our young people are very curious. Our young people have questions. Our young people are always seeking to learn and to find out things. Our young people are looking to mind our own business and see how we navigated life and how we navigated our own challenges, what's happening in our lives, you know. I teach at a Catholic girls' college here in Trinidad and Tobago, and they always want to know, so you have a wife, so you have children, so if I was your daughter, how you would have responded? They always want to know more about you, they want to know more about life and what's happening and how to navigate certain situations in their lives and how you would respond and what would be your thoughts on particular situations that are happening in society right now as well. They're curious, they want to learn, they want to listen from their elders. And that line tells us from the gospel here that Jesus was doing that. Jesus as a youth was doing that. So naturally, we should expect our young people to do the same. And if we throw back our minds, some of us are here still quite young, but if we throw back our minds for those of us who are older, we could think back to a time when we too had our own questions. And we may not have always had the space to explore those questions, but definitely we had questions, we had opportunities to listen, we had opportunities to learn, and those were fundamental during our formative years and during these years of youth ministry. Here we have somewhat of a spectrum where we can see the range of ages for youth ministry. In Trinidad, we use the age of 11 because that's typically the age where students enter into secondary school or the secondary school system after writing the secondary entrance assessment. So we typically like to use that age of 11 being the lower marker of the spectrum for youth ministry, and the upper end we use 35. And here we have a spectrum just showing you what happens and what is likely to happen during the course of youth ministry and during the years of youth ministry or during these hidden years. So we start off here with middle childhood or early adolescence at around 11, 12. And typically, like I said, we enter secondary school at that age. We see some transition periods here, like around 15, 18, 21, 25, 30. That's because developmentally, it's never really clear, it's somewhat ambiguous how someone might be responding based on their own life situation and how they were nurtured and raised and that kind of thing. We have different outcomes for our young people at these ages. So it's not like these things are all set in stone. At 11, you have to enter secondary school. At 15, you're going to be considered an older adolescent. At 21, you're going to be in UE or university. That's not what we have this spectrum for. It's rather for us to be able to have a gauge or a sense of what's happening or what can happen or what things to consider during this spectrum of the hidden years of youth ministry. All right, so we see some things like education taking up a huge chunk of the youth ministry years from 11 all the way up to about 24, 25 and beyond in some cases. So we look at this a bit further when it comes to settings, but if education is taking up such a huge chunk of the lives of our young people, then definitely that's something we need to be considering how we factor that in when we consider programming for our young people. We see around 18, just after secondary school, up until 35 and beyond, we see employment, young people looking for opportunities, some persons working and studying, some persons are only studying, some persons are only working for the sake of supporting their families, some persons are working to move on their own and that kind of thing. Later on in the early young adult years, we see that they have family and parental obligations, paying bills at home, supporting the family, in some cases raising the younger siblings. We see dynamics like that emerging in families across society, and these are things and dynamics that we have to be aware of when it comes to programming for youth ministry. Below the spectrum here, we see union formation. So you're looking to find a significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, trying to settle down, get married, have children, start families. We see that union formation starting within the middle, well, in a more serious way from mid or older adolescence up until older young adulthood. Childbearing ages from legally at least 18 to 35. We also see a shift in more recent years. We're seeing a shift in that bracket where childbearing tends to be pushing, a little further down now, into 20s, late 20s, even early 30s for various reasons. And I believe one of the subsequent sessions will cover the differences in generations and why we have later marriages, people getting married at later ages and childbearing at later ages. But for now, we just want to consider the context and the situations that young people might be faced with. And of course, when we're using the word youth and young people, we're referring to both adolescents and young adults. Finally, we see marriage. And like I said, that's right now it's from around 24 to 35. And like I said, currently this bracket is being shifted further and further down, even though locally in our managers, we're seeing some, pretty young weddings coming up here locally, which is encouraging at least to see that happening. Let's move on to the third line of statement. Did you not know that I must be in my father's house, or about my father's business? And the Catechism tells us that the desire for God is written in the human heart. All right, so because we are created by God and for God, God never stops or God never ceases to draw us onto God's own self. So because of that, our business, our own nature is to seek God, is to find God. And that's exactly what Jesus was doing in the temple. So at the heart of it all, our young people are yearning for an encounter with Christ. They're yearning to learn Christ and to know more about Christ and to encounter Him in a more deep and intimate and personal way. So we have to bear that in mind. Youth ministry is not just about fun and games. It's not just about confirmation classes, or it's not just about helping them to navigate their school life. Ultimately, we need to be leading our young people to an encounter with God, a personal relationship with God, because our faith teaches us that is ultimately our desire. God has etched into our hearts very deeply in a irrevocable way, a desire for God's self. So we need to bear that in mind as we program and as we consider youth ministry efforts and initiatives. Finally, we see that he lived under the authority and increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with people. And I want to underscore here the importance of the village. So young people, we all exist within community, and the village raises the child, the village helps to support, but the child also gives back to the village and shares his or her own gifts and talents with the wider community. So youth ministry is about a space, almost like an incubator or a cocoon, to help young people find themselves, to understand their unique gifts and talents, and figure out now how they can contribute to the wider society and to the wider parish life. All right. So this is what we know so far about the hidden years of Jesus, the years of 11 to 30, where not much was said after the temple until he started public ministry at the age of 30 in his late young adult stages. So we don't know what the process looked like for Jesus. We don't know what he went through, but we do know what it could look like, or could have looked like, or is looking like for us. And that's what we want to jump into before we jump and move even further into the content for this evening. And we have an activity here. And I realize a lot of us are shy to turn on our microphones, but we are going to be forced to do so now because we have an activity called True, Twisted, or Tell Me More. So basically, we're going to share an interesting story from our own hidden years. We don't know about Jesus and what exactly happened. Some people used to theorize and jokingly say that Jesus used to raise lizards from the dead as a child, and he used to, when Mary was bathing him, he used to split the water in two, just like in the days with Moses and that kind of thing. People joke about all sorts of different things, but we don't actually know the fine details about the life of Jesus within those hidden years. But each of us here, we have our own stories and we have our own versions of our own hidden years. And I want to open the floor now. Actually, how many of us in this room now? Because I've only seen people entering, so maybe we could break off Yeah, so we'll break off into some small groups. And I'm gonna explain the activity, and we'll go off into these small groups and share with each other a story, an interesting story from our hidden years. But your story, as you can't share your story, must fall into one of the following categories. The story must either be completely true, it must be either completely true or twisted, meaning partially true with some exaggerated version of the story. And finally, it could also be a tell me more version of the story. So you're just leaving out a key detail to leave people wanting more. So you can choose what story you want to use within the years 11 to 33. That's totally up to you, but the story must fall into one of these categories. It must be true, or it must be twisted, or it must be a tell me more version. So I'm just going to break you all up into small groups just to share quickly. Your story shouldn't be more than, 2 minutes, really. Actually, I'm going to ask Megan I want to leave the screen up. I want to leave the activity up in the meantime. And ask Megan just to create four groups. Yeah, 4 groups for us. And we take in 10 minutes, each person taking 2 minutes each, give or take, adding a little silence there. So 10 minutes in all to do this activity, sharing an interesting story from your hidden years. And your story must fall into one of these categories. At the end of the person sharing, the group has to now guess, if the story was completely true, if the story was twisted, or if the story was tell me more. Of course, eventually the person will reveal the full truth if it is what version of the story they were telling. All right, do we have any questions about the activity?
Does
No
the story have
question.
to be like,
Sorry?
does the story have to be relating to anything specific, or it's just like a random story?
An interesting story. So something that you find interesting and happened within your life between the ages of 11 and 33.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So in other words, when you were a youth or when you were within these hidden years, something interesting that happened. It could be a traumatic story, an exciting story, something that was unbelievable. You can choose something that's interesting for you within those hidden years. Anybody had a story that was really captivating, that you
Yeah.
mesmerized the group that you want to just share quickly with us? No one? I must say, my group was pretty honest. We had a lot of we had some interesting stories, but they were all true. So it's interesting to know what happens in people's lives, from jaguars attacking people, pets, and getting shot to people in accidents and people dreaming about the future and all kind of thing. It was some very interesting stories, very, very interesting stories that turned out to be true. So yeah. If there's anything I have learned is that, you never know what's really happening in people's lives.
We had interesting stories too, which were all true. From mystery to some trauma as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody just want to share very quickly what they might have learned or experienced from just that activity just now? Someone is talking.
Well, I would say it was one thing that's interesting is that from a very early age, I would have learned a lot, I would say, especially growing up from the very tender age and knowing and learning about what the church teaches, and that's very interesting to me that I would have learned a lot, and I would have shared a lot with my colleagues, with my friends, and also my family. That's one thing that I would also be I would say is that probably what I can say
Yeah.
yes, you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Yes, that's what I would have learned right from my early age. I would have learned and shared a lot with my family, with my friends, and that would be that would be what I would have said. That would have been one of my biggest boasts about, right? Because my family would have been a very poorly, especially in the church terms. But I would have came up from a very early age and created a very big impact, especially to my family and my close friends. That would have been a very true and a very interesting part. That is from my part because I would have impacted a lot of lives in my family and my friends, and they would have also joined me and also followed me. Because right about now, would have say I have a lot of young people that would like to be and would like to follow me, and that's one interesting thing that I would say because my family is not that very churchy, I would say, not so very. They did not grow up into this Catholic faith, but I am very proud at this moment because I have a lot of family and friends that are looking forward to me, and I would like to be one of the biggest role model within the community, and furthermore, I would say in the future, hopefully I become a leader within the church itself and the community, and that other people would follow me, and I would surely be a role model for them, I would say. Yes, that is it.
Thank you, David. So we hear about the early impact of faith in David's life and how that has influenced his decisions and motivated him now to be an example or exemplar in his community now. So thank you for that, David. We're going to jump into some of the content for this evening. Probably just move through it pretty quickly. So the content that we're exploring is taken from this book, Renewing the Vision, which was released in the United States, and it provided a new map for youth ministry and a vision for comprehensive youth ministry. And of course, when we say youth ministry, we're referring to both adolescent and young adult ministry. This document was also embraced and endorsed by the AEC bishops, and we have our own vision for youth ministry and young adult ministry in the Caribbean, and that book was written in 2003. So we also have some references from that book here in this presentation. So I'm just going to scroll through these very quickly because this is what comprehensive youth ministry proposes. It proposes that the new map for youth ministry looks like a link between parish life and young people. So young people are not just existing within silos or on their own. It's not just about a youth group in a corner somewhere and some one person leading these people. It's about linking the needs of the youth to the life of the parish. So if we go back to the definition of youth ministry, we'll see as the response of the Christian community to the needs of the youth and their families and helping the young people to identify the unique gifts and talents and share it with the wider community. So if they have to share it with their wider community, they need to be existing within some kind of community or parish life. And that's why we look at youth ministry now as a link between what's happening in the lives of the young people and what's happening in the parish or the wider community. Everybody's responsible, all hands on deck. This is not just about a star young man or woman or a good singer or good praise leader or a good animator or good youth group leader. It's not about one person who's able to mobilize young people. It is about everybody playing a role. So we need everybody. We need persons to pray. We need persons who are involved in hospitality. We need persons who can advocate on behalf of the young people. We need persons who can teach and edify our young people. We need people who are able to have fun with our young people and understand how they think and operate. We need people who could help our young people with their academics and their schoolwork, their family life, with whatever it is that they're experiencing. We need everybody on board to share in this ministry to youth. Parish life is the curriculum, so it's not just about specific issues that a young person might be experiencing. It's a broad curriculum that includes the life of the parish. So they need to understand everything that is happening in the parish context. And when we use the word parish here, we're talking about the church, yes, but the wider geographical area that church exists within. All right, so it's not just about St. Peter and Paul RC Church, but also the neighboring facilities and buildings, the basketball court in the area, or you might have a corner somewhere where young people lime in, or a bar, or a beach in the area. Like all of that consists of the parish, the geographical area. In the new map, also, we're moving from youth groups to youth groupings. So we see that it's not just about having one set youth group, but the needs of our young people are quite diverse and varied. So we need to therefore have groupings that respond to the needs of these young people. There's one more. We're targeting all young people, not just young people who come into church, not just our altar servers or those who are in the music ministry. We're targeting everybody. All right. So this includes those who are on the street, those who are in our schools, those who are playing sports on the field and the basketball court, those who are unknown, those who are giving trouble to their parents and don't want to come to church. Like the goal of youth ministry is to be able to target and to reach all of these young people and to bring them into some experience of Christ. There are three goals for youth ministry, as the document outlines. The document referring to here is renewing the vision, and the first goal is empowerment. So the first goal of youth ministry is to empower young people to live as disciples of Jesus Christ in our world today. So the goals I like to refer to as an assessment. All right. So if you want to know if you're doing effective youth ministry, you can always come back to the goals and test and see, well, the young people in my care, the young people who are around us, or the ones that I'm interacting with, are they empowered to live a life of discipleship for Christ in the world? And of course, in the world, referring to in their families, in their schools, in their social clubs, in their sporting arenas, are they empowered to be disciples of Christ? And of course, disciples of Christ might look differently for each person. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are out there reading scripture to everybody, but also it starts somewhere, and they have to be able to be willing to show up as virtuous beings, as people of virtue and value, and who are trying to embody the gospel values in their space, in their respective spaces. So this is a good metric for you to use these goals, and the first one being empowerment. All right. Young people hunger to hear the good news and to find the response. And they find the response in discipleship. So as the companion and as their friends in youth ministry, the spiritual journey, some of us need to be able to hold the hands of our young people to help them experience Christ in a new way so that they can feel comfortable exploring and delving deeper into what it means to be a Christian, or what it means to be a disciple of Christ. Our second goal is participation. Oh, sorry, we have a little bit more here. So about discipleship. So everything that we do with young people in the church today should be assessed through the lenses of evangelization and discipleship. So therefore, we need to adopt approaches that are proven to impact faith and discipleship. And it's a bit tricky as we explore newer and younger generations, Gen Alpha and even Gen Z. Our methodologies have to shift and have to change to effectively pass on our faith and to effectively disciple. One of the fundamental things we need to understand is, in order for us to effectively disciple someone else, we ourselves have to be discipled. We ourselves have to be on our journey of encountering Christ and renewing our own understanding of who Christ is and studying the Word and spending time developing our own relationship with God. It is through that process that we are able now to disciple others, disciple the young people, and to help pass on the faith to them. So that's one of the fundamental things that does not change regardless of generations. You can't pass on the faith if you yourself don't own it for yourself and you don't understand what it is. If you yourself are not a disciple of Christ and working assiduously at developing your own level of discipleship, then you're not going to be able to pass on the faith effectively. So generations come, generations vary, and how to pass on the faith, there are some nuances there, but one of the fundamental things that doesn't change rather, would be that you have to be a disciple in order to disciple others. Next, we're looking at the second goal, participation. And here we see the need to draw young people into responsible participation into the life, mission, and work of the faith community. So if we are creating youth ministry spaces where young people are just in these small groups or in groupings and they're just keeping to themselves, and all of the fun and all of the life and all of the vibrancy and all of the gifts and talents are just being trapped within a closed circuit for young people themselves and for their peers, we're not doing effective youth ministry. The second goal of youth ministry is to draw the young people into responsible participation into the life, mission, and work of the faith community. So it means that we need to be instilling or planting these seeds rather into their minds from early. And it's not to say that you're going to be saying, all right, come and work for us, or come and do this. Oh, you could draw, so come and do banners for your church, or you could sing, come and be in the choir. It doesn't necessarily have to be our first point of engagement with the young person, but definitely we should be bearing this in mind and thinking about how we can draw our young people into participation in the life of the church, the life, mission, and work of the church. All right. So young people do have this desire for connection and to be in a relationship and to belong. And we'll look at that a bit later with the components. But we need to have communities that are youth-friendly, that welcome young people, that are hospitable to the young people, and that valuing their participation and not just trying to use the young people for their youth or for their strength and vitality. So we have to be able to build cultures or build environments and communities that are youth-friendly, that can accommodate this goal. So if we don't have parishes that are able to value or take time to recognize young people and their value and their worth, then we're going to gradually just drift into a place where young people don't want to belong to this community or don't want to be a part of it. So they rather want to just stay among their peers or where they feel seen and heard or valued. And you would find at that point the participation goal isn't easily achievable because of the lack of hospitality and youth friendliness of the parish community. So we need to create opportunities for young people to enter into healthy relationships of trust and respect with their peers, but also with the adults in the parish life and in the wider community. Renewing the Vision tells us that young people are valued. So the youth-friendly parishes is what it looks like. Young people are valued. They're seen as a gift to be shared rather than a problem to be solved or as a resource to be used. That's very important for us to know and hear. And then finally, intentional intergenerational opportunities need to be created. So we have to be able to connect our young people with caring adults. And that's when we have these factors at play in our parish communities, that's when we know we have a youth-friendly parish. So think about your own parishes and where you are and where you served and where you grew up. Were young people valued? Were you, as a young person, do you feel as a gift? Do you feel like you're a gift to be shared in the community, or do you feel like you're a problem to be solved? Them young people not coming, them young people always talking in church. We need to get these young people to come out more, to be more active. Are we creating problems, or are we trying to help the young people to see themselves as gift and to feel valued in our parish communities? And finally, are we creating spaces and opportunities for young people to engage with caring adults and other persons in the parish community? All right, so definitely it's important to create spaces for them to interact and to belong in social spaces with their own peers. But it's equally important for them to have intergenerational spaces where they can learn from caring adults, where they can pass on faith, where they can pass on experiences and wisdom and knowledge to them, but also just for them to share and be amongst each other as an important aspect of parish life and an important aspect of youth ministry as well. So comprehensive youth ministry assumes, in other words, in order for comprehensive youth ministry to really happen, it assumes that youth-friendly parishes are existing and that the faith community is welcoming them through the three tenets we just looked at. It also assumes that a wide variety of opportunities for young people and for youth involvement in the parishes are present. All right. And finally, a team of visionary adults and youth leaders who plan and lead parish ministry to, with, by, and for young people. So these are some of the assumptions for comprehensive youth ministry. In other words, what I'm sharing here about these goals and later on the components and the settings, in order for it to be effective and for it to really flourish, these dynamics must be at play. You must have a youth-friendly parish. You must have a variety of opportunities. You can't just have young people who are, your only opportunity for young people to be present to serve is as an altar server, for example. You want to be able to create a wide variety of opportunities for the young persons to be involved in the life of the parish. And then finally, you have to have people, a team of persons actively planning and visioning and dreaming about how youth ministry can flourish in the parish and how ministry to, with, for, and by young people can take place. And as you can see here, the visionary team is both adult and youth leaders. You want to have a good mix of adults and young people on the team so that you have some balance and you have the creative insights and knowledge from the young people, but also have some measure of sustainability and groundedness coming from the adults as well. So bear these in mind as we navigate exploring comprehensive youth ministry. The final goal for youth ministry is actually growth. Purpose of growth here is to foster the total personal and spiritual growth of each young person, right? So you must be able to look back after a year or two and see, hey, this young person has really grown spiritually. I could see how they were shy in the earlies to even make the sign of the cross publicly, but now they're praying, they could pray the Our Father, or they could pray spontaneously in a moment. That is a sign of growth. We could also see we could test the growth or assess the growth from their ability to interact with other people, to be social, how they regulate their emotions, how they're doing in their schoolwork because of programs that you might be offering in the parish. So these are ways that you could test to see growth. And of course, all together, you want to be able to find ways to constantly be assessing your youth ministry and what's happening in your parish life and in your community. So through these three goals of empowerment, participation, and growth, you want to be able to test and see, are my young people empowered to show up and to be disciples in the world? Do they feel confident enough to share their testimony? Do they feel confident enough to talk openly about scripture or to share a word on their social media profiles? Are my young people participating in the life of the church? Are they interested in what's happening in church, or are they only interested in what's happening in youth group or in a youth grouping? That's important for us to note and to be able to assess. And if we are able to honestly assess these things, we kind of going to know how to tweak what we're doing with our youth ministry programming. Finally, growth. Are we fostering total and personal and spiritual growth for each young person? And of course, we're targeting all young people, not just the young people within the pews, not just the young people we have access to easily because their parents come into church or because we know them or we have friends, but all the young people. Are we trying to reach out to all of these young people and to assess them effectively? Next, we want to look into the components of youth ministry. Looking at time, 8:10. So I think I'll probably skip the in-depth things and go to an abridged version of it. Because the components are responding to needs ultimately. At the start of the session, I asked you all, what do you need? What do you see yourself as needing right now? A lot of people said rest, say a massage, a spa day with the girls, a day on the beach. All those things talking about rest and relaxation, and those are valid and very much noted. Because as youth ministers, we're working hard, and very often we are full-time youth ministers on the low and still have full-time studies or full-time jobs as well. So I want to just look at the components and look at them in the context of needs. So how the specific component responds to the needs that young people, all our young people experience. And this table here just kind of captures the true essence of the needs that the young people experience, but also how it might show up and what it means specifically. A moment ago, we were playing the activity, the True, Twisted, or Tell Me More. And one of the skills that I was trying to evoke or to help us become aware of was discernment. Are there signs for us to be able to tell if a story has holes in it or gaps in it? Are we practicing a discerning ear to pay attention to the needs of our young people, but also to pay attention to what they're saying to us and what it could possibly mean? In some cases, like in my group, Jessica was on point. She was just like, yeah, that's true, that's true, that's twisted, that's true, that's true. She was able to spot it, and that was a very good demonstration of discernment there. And discernment is a very important skill and gift that is needed in the life of youth ministry, because not always our young people are going to be able to outwardly express or openly express their specific needs. Sometimes they may be saying things, or they may have or exhibit particular behaviors that we now have to be able to discern to figure out what they're trying to say to us or what their need might actually be because of this specific behavior or this word that they might be saying or this story that they told us. So we're going to look at the 8 components of youth ministry. This is in alphabetical order here. The first being advocacy. The need that advocacy responds to is to be respected, valued, and to be given a voice. So what advocacy means is that youth need the church to stand with them and for them, especially when they feel invisible or unheard. So very often, you can think of advocacy or this component as people, older persons, that are championing for the young people, championing their cause, championing for them for things to happen. Sometimes they may be struggling to get a particular project off the ground because the parish don't want to give finances. These adults who would champion for their cause and say, no, let's give the young people a chance. Let's create these spaces. They will go out and look for funding and bypass the parish. So these are some of the examples of how advocacy shows up. Now, any young person, what might be needed from them, for them, an outward expression of advocacy might be when the young persons are loudly questioning decisions or asking questions about why or being curious. We saw that Jesus himself in the temple was listening to the elders and asking questions and learning and drinking from them. So we see here that's how a sign of the advocacy shows up. So when young people are loudly questioning decisions or protesting or calling out unfair treatment, these are ways that alert us to the need of advocacy, so that they need to be respected. There's a need for the young person to feel respected, valued, and given a voice, and therefore some bodies need to show up to advocate on behalf of the young people. In some cases, in the more hidden or repressed version of expression, we see withdrawal, sarcasm. The young person might be jaded. Well, things never go our way. We never get what we want. Things like that. You hear statements like that. And that's kind of pointing towards the need for advocacy. They need someone to speak on their behalf, someone to show up for them, to help them feel seen and respected, and to feel like their voice matters. All right. We also see when they are silent, when decisions are being made without them. So they might be on a team, on your very own visionary team or youth planning team. Young persons are present and they're not being heard. They're not being welcomed into the space. They're just silent and just watching decisions being made. Someone needs to speak up and say, hey, Maya, I think you should try to share your opinion with us. Do you think this will work? Do you think this will work? Do you think it'll be an effective form to reach your peers? So bring them into the conversation. Advocacy work looks like that. The second component of youth ministry is catechesis. And the need that this responds to is the need to understand and make sense of their faith. So youth want clear, relevant teaching to navigate life and faith meaningfully. So catechesis is not just about passing on the faith and teaching the dogma and the catechism of the church, but we have to be able to find ways to teach it to them where they can find value in it and see how it relates to their own lives and how this information can help them to navigate their life and their faith meaningfully. So ways that this shows up asking tough theological or ethical questions. Why is it wrong to abort a baby? Questions like that would come up. Challenging teachings. So if there's a particular teaching that the church espouses or teaches or passes on, you might find the young people asking questions about it or saying that's not making sense or something wrong with that, for example. And those are outward expressions that the need for catechesis is present. Some more hidden ways that that need shows up would be disinterest in church activities because they don't understand what's happening, or they might be quietly Googling answers or feeling disconnected. Of course, like I said, discernment is key. You have to be present. You have to be paying attention to the behaviors of the young people. You have to be paying attention to what they're saying and what they're not saying in order to find out the need. And based on the need, you'll be able to determine the component to respond to that need. Moving quickly along, we see community life is a very big and important and very fundamental component when it comes to youth ministry. They're all important, but community life tends to show up as a first need, the need to belong and to experience genuine relationships. All right, so youth want to feel safe, accepted, and connected. They want to have a space where they could just be and they could be themselves and they could be quirky and they could have fun and they could engage and enjoy others' company and they don't feel judged, they feel safe. That's the kind of space that they're looking for. And community life is a component that responds to that need. They need to belong and to find genuine and earnest connection. So outward expressions of this, people who show up early, you tell them 6 o'clock, 4:30, they're in the churchyard waiting for the church to open or in the hall waiting for things to open up so they could just jump into the activity and have fun and engage and meet people. So showing up early is often a very sign that that person is longing to belong or longing for that need to be met. Forming close friendships and then constant presence at events. So everything you have in these young people showing up because they want more, they want to belong, they want to have a space, or they enjoy the safety of the space that you have created for them. Some more hidden expressions of that need would be hovering alone on the sidelines, ghosting group chats. They might just be in a group chat and avoiding it or leaving group chats every time you add them, and then hesitating to share opinions. All right, they may not feel safe, and you have to help them to find that safety and to find that sense of belonging within the context of the parish life or whatever social group or youth grouping that you might have. Fourthly, we look at evangelization. To encounter Jesus and to know their lives matter to God. So youth desire a personal and transformational relationship with Christ. Right? As we looked back at the definition, we looked at the I think it was the second to last line from the gospel, that ultimately Jesus was about his Father's business, and the Catechism teaches us that God has etched a desire for God's own self in each of our hearts. So evangelization is the need that kind of just responds to that sense, that desire for personal and transformational relationship with Christ. And outward expressions, sharing faith openly, inviting others to church, and then enthusiasm to go on retreats and to learn about their faith. Some more hidden expressions of that will be expressing emptiness or chasing trends or popularity, longing for something more. These are ways that you could tell that the need is there for some measure of evangelization to take place. Justice and service, a big component for the younger generations in particular, to make a difference and to act on their own values. So youth want to act on their beliefs and to see their efforts changing the world, making some kind of significance in the world. That is what justice and service seeks to respond to. Volunteering, initiating projects, joining outreach initiatives and outreach teams. Those are outward expressions. Some more hidden expressions would be frustration with just talking. We're always talking about this, we're never doing anything. When you hear that type of language, there's a need for justice and service, the component to arise in the programming of youth ministry. And then skepticism, burnout, and then skepticism of the institution, whether it is the government or family life or the church itself, they lose belief in these systems because they're not seeing anything happening. Action isn't taking place, it's just talk. So therefore they get jaded or they get skeptical about what these institutions are saying. Leadership development, to be trusted and challenged to lead. That's a need that is taking place there, and this is responding to it. What it means is that youth crave responsibility, they crave mentorship and opportunities to lead meaningfully. All right. So as a leader yourself, you have to be able to find opportunities to develop other young people and to give them opportunities and spaces to lead or to be mentored or to mentor others or to share in the life of the youth ministry. And this shows up in very simple ways. It could just be talking them through how to set up for a space and then doing that a couple of times with them and then a third time just allowing them to go and set up the space themselves. It could be on how to share testimony. You could prepare with them how you doing it for yourself and then sharing with them, giving them the opportunity eventually to prepare on their own and to share. So you have to find ways to develop our young people and to create spaces for the leadership development to take place. So outward expressions, organizing events, offering to lead prayer and to plan sessions, and then more hidden ways, over controlling behavior. We see that through this behavior, you could tell that they want to lead, they want to do something, they want to be in control of a situation, perfectionism, or quietly waiting for permission to lead. These are hidden ways that they might display that leadership development is what they're looking for. Pastoral care, which the needs there would be to be heard, supported, and accompanied through life's challenges. So youth need compassionate presence and guidance in their personal struggles. And pastoral care is what is a component that the church offers to respond to that. So seeking conversations and the help of trusted adults, that's how one of the outward expressions, crying, expressing confusion or emotional pain. We have young people that might feel safe enough to do that, and those are outward expressions. So they need for pastoral care to investigate what's taking place, whether it's at home or bullying at school or some personal challenge that they're experiencing. These are ways that it might show up outwardly, and that we have to be discerning and attentive to or sensitive to be able to recognize what is taking place. Likewise, the hidden expressions will be always cracking a joke inappropriately to mask pain or avoidance or using simple terms, I'm okay, I'm fine, constantly. Every time you ask them how they're doing, it's just I'm fine or I'm okay, and never able to push beyond those words. Those are little flags that you have to be aware of to tune you in to the need of pastoral care. Finally, prayer and worship to connect with God in ways that are meaningful and real. So youth long for awe, for silence, for music, for authentic spiritual connection, and for experiences that help to move them and help them to feel connected to God. So engaging deeply in praise and worship, journaling, volunteering for prayer team, or for praying with others, these are ways that this shows up. More hidden ways would be zoning out during Mass because they don't understand the value of prayer and worship. They don't connect with it and they zone out as a result of that and need to work on that component. Asking why should I care or craving peaceful or sacred spaces. These are more hidden expressions of how this component shows up. All right. I want to pause here. I've been talking a lot. So I want to pause here to see how we have been processing the content that I've been sharing so far. I have a little activity for us, a little quiz to see how we're doing. So I'm just going to launch the various questions and you just vote in. It's a multiple choice thing, either or. Made it pretty simple, just to make sure you understand, but also for you to see some practical examples of how these components may show up in your youth ministry. So I want to ask everyone it's anonymous. So if you vote wrong, don't feel bad. Nobody could see what including me, I can't see what it is either, who voted what and etc. But here we have a scenario. I want to invite you to vote your thoughts on whether it's evangelization or catechesis is in need for this situation. Samantha asks deep questions about the Eucharist, saints, and why the church teaches certain things. She sometimes feels frustrated when adults can't answer her questions. What is the need here? See, 2 people answer so far. All right, either you'll have very good students or I made it too easy. Time will tell. But good job. Yes, indeed, catechesis is the the component that is needed to respond to these needs, these questions about her faith that she has. Let's look at another question. Dante has been vocal about the lack of ramps and access for his friends who uses a wheelchair. He also feels that youth aren't consulted when the parish makes decisions that affect them. Which one of the components are at play here? Is it advocacy or is it justice and service? All right, so we see most people got it right, just one or two persons selected justice and service. So because of how it's phrased, the answer is advocacy. He felt as if his voice isn't being heard. So definitely there are some justice issues here, but the higher need at this moment would be advocacy because of how it's phrased. He's vocal about the lack of ramps and access, but he also feels that youth aren't being consulted when the parish makes decisions that affect them. So in other words, the need for others to speak on behalf of youth is present, all right? That's the real need that is surfacing here. But I could see why justice and service was selected in some cases. It is because the issue itself is a justice issue. So that's what I said. So the discerning ear or discerning eye or mind or heart is very important when it comes to youth ministry. You have to be able to identify and to look beyond some of these surface things in some cases to be able to really dig in and drill all the way down to the need at its core. All right. Look at another one. Jaden just moved to a new parish and doesn't know anyone. He often skips youth events because he feels like no one notices him. He wants to be involved but doesn't feel like he belongs. Pastoral care is needed here, or is it community life? See, this one's a little trickier, intentionally so, by the way. Just gonna share the results with you for you to see. So the correct answer was community life. We have 5 persons selecting pastoral care, and the use of the word belonging was the giveaway, because community life ultimately is creating a space for our young people to to belong and to form genuine relationships. All right, that's what community life is talking about. Pastoral care is more so about responding to their needs and having them to navigate difficulties that they may be experiencing. So I could see why, it's close there. But community life, because of how it's phrased, community life would take precedence in this instance because we don't have any clear indication that he is, for example, socially awkward, for example, So we can't just make the assumption that pastoral care to help him navigate his awkwardness is what is needed in this instance. It's more so creating the safety because he's new to the environment. So it's creating the safety for Jaden to be able to find a space to belong and to feel like he can be himself in that space. Let's look at another. Maybe just one more. Brianna recently had a powerful experience at a retreat and wants all her friends to know Jesus. She's been bringing them to church, but isn't sure how to talk about her faith without seeming, weird. Which component is at play here? Is it, that should be prayer and worship, or is it evangelization? All right, so evangelization is the answer, and everybody got that correct. So good job to you all. And I was just for us to be able to see some practical examples. I could give several different scenarios and situations. Some get a bit more technical because sometimes more than one component is at play at a similar level. We saw instances here where two might have been at play, but one had a greater precedence. But there are some instances where it's really difficult to discern or to ascertain which one should be given priority. And sometimes you might need to create programming or initiatives to address both simultaneously. So you do have more I guess, trickier situations or scenarios like that. But in the interest of time, we wouldn't necessarily explore those today, just because you all seem to have been good students and have a fair enough understanding of what's taking place here. Just to conclude this evening, I would like to explore the various settings for youth ministry. The document puts forward four main settings: parish, school, family, and community. Of course, because of the era we live in more recent times, the digital setting has also been added to this section of the content. So in the parish, of course, the parish is not just the pews and the church building, but it's also the geographical area or the geographical context that the church exists within. So about the parish, it's a primary spiritual home where youth can connect with the wider sacramental life and their wider church family. So ministry focus looks like youth groups, liturgies, retreats, service projects, leadership roles, these things that happen within the parish context. All right. Next, we see school, a very important and underrated and overlooked very often setting. Because sometimes you just say we let the schools do what the schools have to do. But no, we can't think like that, because if you look back to the spectrum, we see for more than 2/3 or even 3/4 of a young person's life, they study in some academic setting or some school where there's a primary, secondary, or tertiary level institution. So Catholics and other school campuses where faith can be taught, witnessed, and integrated into daily life. Some of the ways that the ministry can look: RI classes, school masses, faith clubs, Catholic student movements, social outreach, leadership development, advocacy work, even in here, social justice projects. These things can happen within the school. For example, taking the Lenten season and encouraging the young persons or class to fast from snacks and save that money and put that money towards a collective pool that they would buy groceries with for impoverished families. These are ways that you can do ministry within the school context, and of course, you have other examples here as well. Within the family, that's the domestic church, or the primary or the very, very first place where faith is nurtured and modeled, at least it should be there within the family context. All right. And equipping parents is very important here, because youth ministry, as we've seen, is the response of the Christian community to the needs, both the needs of the youth and their families. So if we're doing great work with young people and we're not ministering to their families as well, or helping their families to create spaces to continue to work or to even disciple their families, the parents in particular, then you would find it very difficult to sustain the work that you're doing. It'd be very difficult to sustain participation and growth, in particular, if the family isn't in on the ministry efforts. So equipping parents with tools for discipleship and to empower them to be their own disciples within their homes, that's going to be a very important part of this setting of the family. So within the family setting itself, families can have devotions or prayer time together, sacramental prep support. How do I support parents who have children in baptism, confirmation, first communion, etc. And then also integrational encounters. How do we see our faith come into life within our homes, our families? We learn about the fruits of the Spirit. How do those fruits of the Spirit manifest itself in our homes? We learn about the Beatitudes, or we learn about Jesus being a model of perfection, or Mary's fiat. How does this manifest itself in our homes and in our families? All right, so helping our parents and our young people to see that What they learn in church isn't just for church, but it's also for life, and life includes what's happening in their home and their family. The fourth setting for youth ministry is community. So their neighborhood, their geographical area, the wider society, real life social environments of youth. So like I said earlier, it's the basketball court, it's the bar for young adults, it's the beach, whatever is taking place or existing within a geographical area and the wider community. These are spaces or settings that youth ministry can take place. So what type of youth ministry or activities, outreach initiatives, advocacy work, social justice projects, sports, arts ministry, engagement in real life issues, and responding to it, creating murals in spaces, for example, as well. All of these are ways, practical ways that ministry can take place in the wider community. Finally, we see the digital space. Online platforms, digital media spaces where youth can learn to connect and express themselves. And we have social media, obviously, as a clear space for that, social media evangelization, creating small virtual groups, whether it's on Discord or WhatsApp, digital prayer ministry, and using platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram to minister to other young persons, or to minister to allow the young, or to create a space for young persons to allow them to share their faith with other people. All right, so these 5 settings are what I want to present to you as these settings for youth ministry: the parish, school, family, community, and the digital setting. All right. That brings us to the end of our time, well, at least with me today. Not sure if Teresa have anything in store for you, but hopefully this was a useful crash course into just understanding the wider context of youth ministry, what is taking place, the needs, how the church responds to these needs, and the spaces or the settings that the youth ministry can take place within. Of course, I also gave the goals, which you all can use as assessment or as markers to evaluate your youth ministry to know if it's been effective. So, are your youth empowered to be disciples in the world? Are your youth participating in the life of the community, in the life of the parish? And finally, are you experiencing growth from your young people? Are they growing personally and spiritually as they journey with you in your respective youth groupings and your youth ministry? So hopefully this was helpful to you. Thank you for your time and your engagement this evening.